Hi, my name is Amar. Welcome to Clinical Research Concepts. In this video, we are going to examine one of the most important turning points in the history of drug safety. You will see how a single formulation disaster changed the way medicines are regulated and why that event still matters to every patient, clinician, and regulator today. By the end, you should understand how pharmacovigilance grew from a tragedy, why pre market safety assessment became essential, and also why post marketing vigilance remains just as important. Every time a patient takes a medicine, there is an assumption that someone somewhere has already checked that it is safe enough to use. That expectation feels natural to us now, but it was not always part of the healthcare system. In the early 20th century, medicines were reaching the market with very limited legal oversight, and the boundary between a treatment and a poison could be crossed more easily than most people even realized. A medicine may be developed with the intention to heal, but if the product is poorly formulated, inadequately tested, or used without proper safeguards, it can cause severe injury or death. In pharmacovigilance, we refer to these harmful and unintended responses as adverse drug reactions or ADRs. An ADR is not just a minor inconvenience. It can lead to hospital admission, prolonged illness, permanent harm, or even death. And it still remains as a major public health concern even today. To understand why drug safety regulation became such a central part of healthcare, we need to go back to a specific historical moment. The year was 1937, and medicine was entering an exciting era in which new anti infective drugs were beginning to transform survival. But that progress was not yet matched by modern safety laws, and the consequences were devastating. Before antibiotics and any related anti infective medicines became widely available, common bacterial infections could be life threatening in those early days. Sulfanilamide was one of the earliest widely used antibacterial agents, and at that time it was seen as a major therapeutic breakthrough. It offered real hope to patients who previously had very few options. The problem arose when a manufacturer wanted to make the product easier to give, especially to children, by creating a liquid formulation. The active ingredient dissolved well in diethylene glycol, which is a sweet tasting solvent. From a formulation perspective, the mixture appeared practical, but from a safety perspective, it was a catastrophic decision. Diethylene glycol is toxic and can cause severe renal injury, metabolic disturbances, and death. What is striking from a modern perspective is that there was no legal requirement to establish the safety of that formulation before it was marketed. The active drug was known, but the excipient system had not been correctly evaluated. That distinction is extremely important in clinical research and pharmacovigilance. Safety does not depend only on the active molecule. It also depends on the formulation, route of administration, dose, patient population, storage, labeling, and instructions for use as well. The result was a national tragedy. More than 100 people died, and many of them were children who had been given the product for routine infections. The public response was one of grief, anger, and disbelief. Families were asking questions that still sits at the heart of regulations today. How could a product intended to treat illness be sold without proof that it would not seriously harm patients? The Elixir Sulfanilamide disaster exposed a major weakness in the legal framework of that time. Manufacturers were not required to submit evidence showing that a product was safe before distribution. Regulatory attention focused mainly on labeling and misbranding rather than on a systematic scientific review of products' safety. Once deaths began to be reported, the scale of the problem became very clear quickly. Investigators linked the cases to the liquid sulfanilamide preparation, and the toxic role of diethylene glycol was recognized. The event was not a subtle signal that emerged slowly over years. It was an acute and obvious product related catastrophe, and it showed how dangerous the absence of a pre market review could be. See, sometimes safety failures arise from the pharmacology of the active drug, but sometimes they arise from manufacturing and formulation decisions as well. In simple words, patient harm may come not only from what a drug is intended to do, but also from how the final product is prepared and presented for use. The disaster created the pressure that lawmakers could no longer ignore. It became clear that society clearly needed a kind of system in which companies had to demonstrate safety before a drug could enter the market. That shift from reactive outrage to a structured regulation is one of the defining moments in modern medicine's governance. And the response was the 1938 Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act in the United States. This law fundamentally changed the relationship between pharmaceutical manufacturers, regulators, and the public. For the first time, a company had to provide evidence of safety before marketing a new drug product. That requirement may seem basic to us now, but at that time it was a revolution. It established the principle that patient protection cannot depend on trust alone. It must depend on evidence, review, accountability, and regulatory authority. The law also strengthened oversight of labeling and directions for use, ensuring that medicines were not only properly identified but also supported by enough information for safer administration. However, the story of drug safety did not end in 1938. As medicine advanced, new risks emerged that were not always detectable before market entry. The thalidomide disaster in the late 1950s and the early 1960s demonstrated this painfully. A medicine used in pregnancy was linked to severe congenital abnormalities, revealing that pre market safety testing, while essential, was still not sufficient on its own. A medicine may look acceptable during development, but rare, delayed, or population specific harms may only become visible after wider clinical use. This is why safety science must continue throughout the entire life cycle of a medicinal product. After thalidomide, the world moved towards stronger systems for ongoing safety surveillance. Countries began building national spontaneous reporting systems so that suspected adverse reactions could be captured after marketing. In the United Kingdom, for example, the Yellow Card scheme became an important mechanism for collecting reports from healthcare professionals and later from patients as well. The international dimension soon became equally important. Drug safety issues do not have any national borders, and a rare risk may only become visible when data are pooled across many countries. In 1968, the WHO launched an international program for drug monitoring. This created the foundation for global pharmacovigilance collaboration. Over time, this evolved into a large international network through which member countries share safety data, detect signals, and support regulatory action. Today, modern drug regulation is built on several linked principles. Medicines should be assessed before approval. Their quality and labeling should be controlled. Adverse events should be monitored after marketing, and emerging risks should be evaluated continuously against expected benefits. This is no longer a one time approval exercise, it is an ongoing benefit risk process. We have also entered an era in which drug safety is becoming more individualized. Pharmacogenetics has shown that two patients receiving the same standard dose may not respond in the same way. Differences in enzymes such as cytochrome P450 family can alter drug metabolism and expose some patients to treatment failure while placing others at high risk of toxicity. Warfarin is a classic example. For one patient, a standard dose may be appropriate, while for another, it may produce excessive anticoagulation and dangerous bleeding. So, when we talk about modern drug regulation, we are talking about far more than preventing another 1937 disaster. We are talking about a system that must protect populations while also recognizing individual variability. That is the true legacy of this history. Safe use of medicines requires science, regulation, reporting, and humility all working together. This 1937 tragedy showed the world that good intentions are never enough in medicine. Safety must be demonstrated, not assumed. This led directly to the foundations of modern drug regulation systems. As future professionals in this field, the lesson is very clear. Every safety rule we follow today exists because patients once paid a very high price for its absence. Thank you for watching this video. See you all in the next video.